In this week's video, we're gonna finish tearing down the frame on this thing and get it down to the bare frame so we can get ready to build this thing back up. But one of the big tasks we're gonna tackle today is this fuel tank. This thing is pretty gross. Now, I know I can buy a replacement white fuel tank for this bike. I gotta do this kinda on a budget. So we're gonna attempt to sand and refinish the outside of this white fuel tank and see if we can get this yellow discoloration and all these scratches off of it. So let's see what we can do. So as you can tell, I've already sanded the right-hand side of this tank because I just cleaned it and I just wanted to see kind of what it would look like sanded out, and it's not bad. It's actually pretty good. Now I am a realist, and I do understand that over time these white tanks and white plastic tend to turn yellow, and so getting it back to the original white color is probably not much of a reality, but I think we can get it pretty close. I think we can sand this down through different stages and actually polish this plastic to bring the shine back to it and save ourselves about 250 bucks. And like I mentioned, you know, I'm doing this on a budget, so 250 bucks that we can put into somewhere else on this bike, you know, that's just great, you know. So, but another thing that I've done is I've actually started on this air box off camera, obviously, and this was the big one right here, was to see if I could revive this air box, because just for a couple years the CR500's only had a white air box, and trying to find a new one of these is pretty much impossible. So, well, I shouldn't say impossible, extremely expensive. So this thing's coming along pretty dang good. I am aware that they make vinyl pieces that you can put over here as a last resort. That may be what we have to do depending on how this plastic actually polishes out in the end. But as for now, I'm just gonna keep sanding on this thing and see if we can revive this thing back to its original glory. Let me walk you through what it's gonna take to get this tank brought back to life. So the first stage of reviving this tank is basically getting all the grease and the grime off of it as much as we can. I'm gonna hit it with a little bit of brake parts cleaner in these affected areas, and then we'll go through and I will hit it with some detergent, pressure washer, and then we'll start the sanding process of sanding the tank, polishing the plastics, and see if we can bring this thing back to life to where it's good enough, in my opinion, to fit the bike. So let's get after it. Actually scrubbed up decent. I mean, it's still got some pretty bad discolorations, but it's not bad. All I use is a little bit of Simple Green, fairly stiff scrub brush. Got most of the dirt off of it for sure, but let me show you. It's still got quite a bit of yellowing going on. See, if you still look kind of close, it's got a lot of that yellowing and hard plastic nastiness on it, all the way to the top. But if you come over here and look at this side where I spent a little bit of time sanding it, it's not looking all that bad, honestly. Actually looks pretty dang good. Like, if I can get that just a little bit better throughout the whole tank, I mean, it's not that far off white from the factory. Well, that's not factory powder coat, but the white powder coat frame, because I think I'm going to be able to clean this frame up and actually salvage the powder coating on this frame without having to redo it. It's really the only spots where it's kind of worn through is where it's basically covered by the plastics, and everywhere you can see it except for right there, it's in really good shape. So yeah, pretty happy with how that's turned out. So let me show you what I'm gonna start with to actually sand down the tank. Now keep in mind, when you're sanding stuff, especially plastic, you can start with a very heavy grit or you can start with a light grit. Just keep in mind that whatever you put in it as far as sand scratches, you have to remove in the next couple grits of sandpaper. So if you start with 320, you've got to pull out those 320 grit scratches with 400 and then 600 and then so on and so on and so on until we work our way up to about 1,000 to 1,500 grit sandpaper. So what I'm going to start with is a DA with 400 or an orbital sander if you don't have a pneumatic DA sander. And like I said, this 400 grit, it seems to work pretty good without gouging it, but will take out the deep scratches in the tank without harming the plastic. So I'm gonna get the air compressor fired up and we'll start sanding on the other side. So after about, I don't know, 5-10 minutes of sanding with 400 grit, man, you can see the white actually start to peek through where the yellow on the low spots are. But the biggest thing I really want to get out of here are these scratches that are embedded inside of the tank, and they're coming out pretty darn decent. Lots and lots and lots of time-lapse sanding, and yeah, it's just, sanding's not my most favorite thing to do. But at the end of the day, it'll be so worth it to have the factory tank on this thing in better shape. Won't be perfect, because it can't be perfect. I don't think we'll get that good. I don't know, maybe, but we'll try. So let's get back to doing some sanding. Oh yeah, it's starting to look real nice, Clark. So one tip, if you're using a DA or an orbital sander as you're sanding this plastic, is a lot of the time the plastic will actually gum up the sanding pad or sanding grit, sandpaper. It'll gum up the sandpaper. So one thing I do is I like to take some of this gray or this red Scotch-Brite or scuff pad and just, periodically just fire that thing up a little bit. Hit the sanding pad, and that'll actually revive your sandpaper a little bit, so you get more life out of your sandpaper. So this is coming along pretty good, actually. I just about got the big scratch that was right here and the big gouges, rough, nasty area right here to disappear. I about sanded through it, and I'll turn the camera around here and show you kind of where we're at, and then show you the difference between where I haven't sanded and where I've sanded, and the difference in color just alone. It's quite a bit. It's pretty amazing, actually. So you can see that definitive line right there. That's actually kind of a body line, so to speak. So I've intentionally not gone past that just so I can show you the difference from where I have not sanded to where I've sanded. And there was a scratch right there, that big deep one right there. And then there was some pretty bad chafing right in there where it's pretty deep, and it's just about to come out of there. So we got the 600 grit all DA'd, and it turned out really well. I'm super excited how this is coming out. So next step is we need to address where the shrouds actually met up with the tank right here. And if you can see, it kind of like almost chafed the plastic, and it just embedded dirt down inside where the shrouds met the tank. So what I'm going to use to basically clean and scrub that affected area out, because we're not really worried about smoothing that out and making it as smooth as this outside visible piece, is I went on Amazon and I bought these little scrub sanding, I don't know, pads. Bought all these, and it came with the attachment here for a drill. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna, coat this with some glass cleaner for kind of some cleaning agent, I guess, and hit it with the green one, hit it with the red one, hit it with the gray one, and see if we can't clean this area right here. There. So let's see what we can do. I think it's gonna work pretty decent for us. So I got ahead and I pulled the tank off of the bike frame. And look at that. It's turning out pretty good. And I think it's gonna be easier if I set this thing in my lap, and that way I can kind of hold it and move it around and it's not banging around on the frame, because don't have quite as much control with this drill as I did that DA. But here's the problem. I've got Miss Princess over here that's decided that that's a place that she's gonna, take a little nap. I'm gonna have to be the bad guy and make her move. She's gonna be upset with me, to say the least. Hey, Frankie, can I sit in that chair, please? She's not having it. All right, watch out. Watch out. Thank you. Sorry, thank you. Let's see. Yeah, I think this is gonna work a little better. Oh yeah, much better. Well, good morning there, everybody. So last night I spent a couple hours after I turned the camera off sanding. Yeah, more sanding with the DA, and it's turning out really nice. The only problem I'm running into is on the edges in different spots. There's like some little black pinholes almost, from where it's got to be something to do with when they molded this tank, and it's got just a little bit of air pockets in there. So I'm still trying to sand those out, but I don't know if that's even possible on this thing. But the next step on these is going to be wet sanding, and let me show you what we're going to use to wet sand this thing. So obviously 400 grit, we've dry sanded with 400 grit. We're going to come back with 400 grit wet paper and hit it with that, and then slowly work our way up in all these different stages until we hit 2000 grit. Now, effectively what that does is we're taking layers off, right? But as you're taking layers off, you're creating scratches. And like I said earlier, all the scratches you put in, you want to remove until the scratches are so fine that when you go to buff the area, that the compound actually smooths out the 2000 grit scratches. So this is how they do like automotive paints and all kinds of stuff like that. You guys obviously already know that. So that's where I'm gonna be for the rest of the afternoon, probably, is just wet sanding this tank. And then once we get it wet sanded, we'll go ahead and I'll show you what I'm gonna use for a compound and buffing wheels to get this thing to shine up. So let's get going. So while I'm here sanding on this tank, figure's a really good time to talk to you guys that are viewing in and watching my stuff. So if you haven't already, go back and watch the last video of this bike, and it'll tell you where I got the bike, how I acquired the bike, and kind of my thoughts for the plans moving forward with this project. And I asked you guys in the last video what you think I should do with it, whether I should do a resto mod or just go 100% stock. And holy cow, man, you guys in the comment, you guys are awesome. And the majority, I mean, I would almost say all except for maybe 2% of all the comments on there is we're going Restomod on this thing. So what that's gonna mean is basically this bike will look stock from a distance. But once you deep dive into it, you'll realize it has lots of great aftermarket goodies, and I'm gonna try to keep them as retro-ish to the time period of 1992 as possible, but obviously trying to get retro parts for this thing, we're gonna be quite tasking. So that's the plan for that one, and I just can't thank you guys enough that are actually commenting on the videos and taking the time out of your lives to watch what I have going on and the builds I got going on. So like I said, you guys are all the best, and I wish there was a way I could shake every single one of your hands and thank you personally, but this is the best I can do. So let's get back to sanding. All right, so I've gone from 400 to 800. Now we're gonna start on the 1,000 grit, 1,500 grit, and then end with 2,000 before we polish. But check this out, it's looking pretty good. Yeah, that's that white's really starting to come out of there, and it's getting super smooth. And you guys probably can't tell, but it's actually starting to get just a little bit of a reflection the finer grit sandpaper we go. So yeah, more sanding. So for the polishing compound I'm going to use this Shark Hide metal polish. Now, just because it says metal polish doesn't mean it's just for metal. I mean, it says right there on the can, you know, for plexiglass, Lexan, you know, all kinds of, pretty much anything you want to restore to a nice shine. I've used this before and it's awesome. Like, I love it on aluminum, and it works really well on plastic also. Now for the wheels, I got on the old Amazon and bought all of these polishing pads, and they come with, I mean, from super fine to pretty heavy grit, basically polishing pads. And again, like 25 bucks for all these. I mean, heck, it'll take me 5 years to go through all of these. So I'm gonna start with the heavy grit, obviously, and then we'll work our way down to the fine cotton wool pad here, and see if we can get a little bit of sheen out of said gas tank. So let's get going. Check that out. Out in the sun, that's starting to look really good. Huh. All right, well, not too bad for a first cut with some polish. Let's keep going. Well, good morning there, everybody. As you can probably tell, it's dark inside the garage. Yep, power's out again. So that's okay. We're gonna keep polishing on this tank and see if we can get this thing pretty much polished up today. So I've actually had to change up my compound that I'm using on this tank, because for some reason this plastic is a little bit different than what I've polished before. So the Shark Hide stuff, or the shark skin, or whatever it's called, just wasn't quite cutting it literally. So what I did is I actually ended up hitting it first with a little bit of this Meguiar's Ultimate Rubbing Compound, and that seemed to do the trick to get it down to where I needed it. And what I'm finishing it off with is this new finish, and this stuff works pretty good. So I guess what I'm getting at is there's really not a rhyme or reason why I'm using a certain compound. It's more trial and error and see what works, and this stuff is working really well actually. So let's get back to rubbing some more of this on this tank, and I think we'll be done here real shortly. So I'm really happy with how this thing's turning out. It's actually turning out better than expected. But I think for next week's video, let's do some comparison on a steel frame, CR500 steel frame, and an aluminum Honda frame to do weight comparisons. And I'll just kind of go over with you guys why I think one is better than the other, and maybe that'll help you guys make a decision on whether you want to convert your old steel frame CR500 to an aluminum frame modern CR500. I think that'll be a fun one, so we'll catch you guys next time.